We all knew 2018 was going to be the swan song for Ozzie Newsome as the general manager of the Baltimore Ravens. Had a long, proud history of things that he's done and he's accomplished with that organization. And if he wasn't already a Hall of Famer as a player, he most certainly would be on the list someday for an induction to the Pro Football Hall of Fame as an executive. There was no question about that. And we knew that once the 2018 NFL Draft happened and Ozzie Newsome traded up into the last pick of round one to take Lamar Jackson, that it was also going to be perhaps the last year of the Joe Flacco era in Baltimore. Interesting. Two guys that have been associated with the Ravens and their successes and non-successes for quite a while. You felt like this was going to be their swan song, their last go-round. And you wondered how this was all going to play out with Ozzie Newsome at the end of his career, Joe Flacco at the end of his run as the starting quarterback, the franchise quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. Well, the initial returns were not that promising. This was started off the year 5. Now all of a sudden you're talking a less than dignified way for the era to end for both of these guys.
John Harbaugh's seat goes from getting a little warm to getting really, really red hot to the thought that he might not be the head coach come 2019 for this team. But Joe Flacco got hurt, and everything changed. The Lamar Jackson era finally began after the bye week. After that 4-5 start, here was going to be Lamar's chance to show that he could be the guy, to start to fulfill on that promise that he made at the draft after he was picked. He told Deion Sanders he was going to bring Baltimore a Super Bowl. And certainly nobody expected him to do that in his rookie season. But once Lamar got in the lineup, everything changed for this team. The Ravens went on to win 6 of their last 7 games. You had that Week 17 thriller where they were able to hang on and beat the Cleveland Browns to win the AFC North. So for a team that, frankly, it felt like in a period of a bit of a transition on the go, you have your veteran quarterback, Super Bowl champion quarterback, go down with injury a little more than midway into the season. And in comes the rookie that you have so many hopes and future promises built on. And he helps lead you to 6 victories in your last 7 games, and you win the division. You go to the playoffs. While the playoff performance in theory wasn't good, it was still a trip to the playoffs. And for all those that were so desperate to get Joe Flacco into the game in that playoff loss to Los Angeles, for all of those that were ready to bench Lamar Jackson, said you had to ride with Joe Flacco, when you look at the way that game played out, as bad as Lamar was in the first 3 quarters, there is no question. You go with the kid that brought you to the dance. Period. You know what Flacco is, and you know what he's not. And for a team in a game where they were having trouble protecting their quarterback, why the hell would you put in a 6'5" statue back there who hasn't played in 2 fucking months? Just the stupidity sometimes of football Twitter and the stupidity of football fans and football media is mind-blowing. Look at what happened in that 4th quarter. Lamar made a couple of big plays. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, before you know it, the Ravens have a chance late in that game. They have the ball with a chance to win. And certainly, it ended in disappointing fashion. And certainly, the majority of the game, the offensive performance for the Ravens was absolutely putrid. But think about how much Lamar Jackson learned and how much better he could potentially be for that wild card loss performance. Going in there and really struggling and frankly sucking hind tit. And then overcoming those challenges, showing mental toughness, and being able to lead his team on this great comeback. I mean, if you're a fan of the Ravens, you have to feel better about your future now, as opposed to if you would have brought in Flacco in the 4th quarter, maybe you have a touchdown drive, and then that's it. And then what the hell did you accomplish? You potentially sabotage your young quarterback on a major stage. You just don't do that. Instead, the Ravens did it, and maybe in the long term, they could potentially reap the rewards of it. And what's really interesting is how this Ravens team was a tale of 2 offenses. The offense with Joe Flacco, and then the offense that was customized and built around the strengths and weaknesses of Lamar Jackson.
He's got a long ways to go as a passer, although he does show some flashes of being able to understand NFL defenses, read NFL defenses. His accuracy, his natural slinging of the ball with the sidearm leaves something to be desired. But this team, this coaching staff knew that, understood that, and built this offense on the fly, which is really tough to do, make that midseason adjustment around Lamar Jackson and his strengths and the team's strengths, which was him and Gus Andrews in the running game. Imagine how much Gus Andrews, who the hell is that? Well, he was a stud for them once he got the opportunity. And then you got Lamar Jackson, who was a stud running the football. And this Ravens team went on that late season run in part because of their ability to run the ball, combined with that great defense that they had, that elite level defense. And I don't know that elite level defense showed up nearly as much as it needed to in that playoff game against the Chargers, but it was a winning formula for the Ravens to take what looked like it was going to be a really lost season and turn things around and make a playoff run out of it. And when you look at the future, Ozzie Newsome's legacy, his last draft class, Hayden Hurst, you hope he stays healthier long term, but he's definitely a nice player. Lamar Jackson, we will ultimately find out whether he is not the franchise quarterback long term for this Ravens team, but you at least have to have some optimism about the future. Orlando Brown Jr. is going to be an 8 to 10 year starter at offensive tackle. Mark Andrews had a pretty nice rookie season at tight end, and then Gus Andrews, undrafted, had a really good season as running back. You got some immediate contributions out of a rookie class. That's not bad. Not bad at all. And going into this offseason, the Ravens have a little bit of cap room. You've got the $24 million you already had. Now you've got the reported deal of Joe Flacco going to the Denver Broncos for a 4th-round pick, which you'll wonder why the hell the Denver Broncos would trade for taller, less mobile Case Keenum when they already had the original Case Keenum in-house for the right to pay him even more money. Like the fact that the Ravens could take somebody that for all intents and purposes they were going to cut and be able to trade him for a mid-round pick was one of the first great moves that new general manager Eric DeCosta could make. Like, how is that? You got somebody to actually pay Flacco's contract. You actually got somebody to give you something to take him off your hands. Make the decision easier for you. Incredible. Some teams get it, some teams don't. But you might have the ability to clear out a little more salary cap space. You would assume Michael Crabtree is probably going to be gone. Eric Weddle may or may not be brought back, or if he is, maybe he'll be brought back on a rework deal. Will Jimmy Smith be brought back, or could he potentially be a cap casualty with some of the issues with injuries and suspensions and so forth that he's had? It will be interesting to see because the Ravens have quite a number of free agents they have to make decisions on. Terrell Suggs, do you bring him back? The longtime Raven, going all the way back to 2003. My God. Think about that. 2003. He's been in the league 16 damn seasons. This 2019 mark is 17. C.J. Mosley, you got to make a decision on him. John Brown, Brent Urban, Zadarius Smith, Ty Montgomery, R.G. Nee, Buck Allen, Alex Collins, Nick Boyle, Matt Skura. I go on and on and on. The Ravens have a lot of guys they're not going to be able to pay all of them, so they have to pick and choose who are the guys that they're going to bring back. You would assume C.J. Mosley would be priority number one, and maybe Brett Urban and Zadarius Smith would be next on the priority list. So they could use all the cap space they got because you don't want to sit there and have a bunch of roster upheaval at this point, I would think, just because you want to be able to try and build off of the momentum that you got the second half of this past season. But they're going to need to have another good draft here. You look at this team specifically on the offensive side of the ball, they need a couple of young wide receivers. Like, this is a position they need to address multiple times in this draft. And maybe where Ozzie Newsome failed in terms of drafting that position, the new general manager will be more successful. But they need some dudes. They definitely need some dudes. This is really a patchwork unit of Crabtree and John Brown and Willie Snead. I can get by maybe with that for a season, maybe two, but eventually these veteran retreads from other places are not going to be your long-term answer at that position. And it forces you to spend money on a position that you really don't want to have to spend money on if you don't need to, especially for lesser-tier players. So this team must address this position. I would assume they will address it either in round 1 or maybe round 3 or sometime on day 3 as well. I wouldn't be surprised if it was multiple picks. I feel like they could use some internal line depth on the offensive side. Marshall Yanda's not getting any younger. You want to potentially have his heir apparent in place, ready to go. Defensively, they could always use another edge rusher. They could use some more depth at cornerback. This Ravens team is good. I don't know if they're ready to be great yet. And frankly, it's got to all be about helping Lamar Jackson. You got to get some more talent at the skill positions, help his protection up front a little bit, because if you want to take that next step, Lamar is going to have to be that dude and get better.